Thank you, Jim. Thank you to everybody associated with planning not only this year's event, but all of the prior 6 years, and for that matter, all of the efforts that you all have engaged in here at a community and local government level. It's been a privilege through the University of Florida to work so closely with Sarasota County over so many years, especially on issues in the built environment, on energy efficiency, and water and low-impact development. But I have to admit, it's kind of humbling to be here today and to be asked to present as a keynote, because to some degree, I feel like I should be doing the opposite. I should be standing here learning from each of you. You all are applying these things on the ground in the real world. All of these issues, these green challenges that we face, you all are doing it. And sometimes we get stuck in the ivory tower up at the University of Florida and all the other academic institutions around the state. So I really do appreciate everything that you all provide back to us. And so I hope I can stimulate some of the dialogue for the rest of the day. And I look forward to the event. So I'm here I was asked to be here because of a fact sheet that we put together for the Florida Energy Systems Consortium called Green Jobs, What, Why, How, When, and Where. And I actually think it's a kind of a sweet irony to see the photo that we had both in the fact sheet and that you see here, because this is a bunch of citizens from Sarasota County that are asking for green jobs. And I think you guys have been the trailblazers for a long time, and it seems like you're continuing to be that. So I hope to talk to you a little bit about what we think green jobs are, where they're going, and what it might mean for you here locally. You've probably heard a lot of different terms and words for green jobs, but I'm going to try to give you kind of the national scale summary from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics with regards to what green jobs are. Now, there's different things going on at different levels from state to regional, but we'll give you the quick summary. And as we do that, I want to kind of ask you through the duration not only of my presentation, but of the day, to kind of think about this idea of what is green, greener. What is a green job? At its core, it's really a relational issue. There is no such thing as a true green job. There may be a greener job than the alternative, but there's no such thing as a true green job, because just like sustainability, we're talking about a receding horizon here. As we get close to that goal, we realize that the goal line has changed and the dynamics have shifted, and we need to reorganize and realign ourselves. So I do want to stress that. It's really about understanding alternatives, you know, the yin and yang, so to speak, of what makes for a green job and a conventional job. There's 5 different major job categories defined by the BLS for green jobs. And those are, and I'll kind of talk about them in order of left to right as you see the 5 images up here. Renewable energy production, and generally shifting from a fossil fuel-based economy towards a more renewable alternative fuel-based economy. That's things such as green goods and services within the electricity, heat, fuel generated from renewable resources, and also processes that are associated with procuring those goods and services. The next one is the energy efficiency sector. So basically using that energy in a wiser way, getting more productive work out of the same energetic input, whether you're talking about the renewable or you're talking about conventional fuels. Obviously, there is a lot of low-hanging fruit in this realm. There's a lot of focus at a national and a statewide level on things such as energy-efficient retrofit programs for residential and commercial sector, loan programs, and we're still trying to kind of feel our way through how to get there. The next category is pollution reduction, removal, and greenhouse gas emission reduction, as well as material recycling and reuse. So this is basically the idea of reducing our impact by changing the way that we're procuring and then reprocessing goods and services through the system. The fourth one is natural resource conservation, and that's could range anywhere from wildlands preservation to low-impact development, stormwater management, to different land management practices, sustainable forestry, organic agriculture, anything that deals with something that's other than, say, the built environment. And then the fifth category is environmental compliance, education, training, and public awareness. In each of these different realms, there's a variety of job opportunities and strategies that can be approached. And we kind of tried to capture some of this in a chart that gives you a feel for what we're talking about, simplifies it down to a few things. When we're talking about how to manage our resources, there's really three major things that we're focused on. We're focused on energy and water and material goods, or matter, so to speak. That's the minerals, the metals, the biomass and other things that go into all of the goods we produce. Ultimately, those resources are there to enable what I would simplify down to four major human actions. And all of the complexity and beauty of our economy and our modern world, in some degree or another, kind of comes down to these four major things. It's basically how we eat and drink, how we dwell, how we move from place to place, and how we commune. And how we commune would be everything from entertainment to our spiritual outlets and pathways to any other way that we fulfill that desire to be these social animals that we are. But within those four actions, all of these goods and services, all the job market that we're talking about, is really addressing 5 different stages of procuring and enabling those four actions I just mentioned. Those stages are production, processing, distribution, consumption, and post-consumption. And whether you're talking about the BLS standards and the way they break out and define green jobs, or you're talking about what is being defined here at the state level, they generally are falling in these categories. And so you'll see a lot of discussion about that. Ultimately, the manner in which we procure these goods and services leads to outcomes. You all have done a really good job kind of putting a guiding light together for the state of Florida on how to determine better outcomes. You guys do set goals and monitor your progress. And I gave a couple of example ones here. And with any outcome, whether we're talking about the goods and services that enable these actions through the conventional job market or the green job market, there's kind of a positive or negative potential in that outcome. And we threw up 5 as an example here. And as you can see in the top right, this concept of opportunity and constraint is basically livelihoods, human livelihoods. Are we creating policies and regulations that constrain innovation and opportunities for a small business to innovate and do progressive things? Or are we creating a nice synthesis of regulations and private sector innovation that creates opportunity for success? There's also the health category, where we're talking about well-being or malaise. Are we enabling good health, whether we're talking about human health or ecosystem health or economic health from a system standpoint? We're also talking about equity issues, whether it's just and fair or unjust. And we're obviously in the green job market, you're going to hear a lot of discussion about this idea of equity and fairness and empowering those voices and those people that are currently underrepresented in the job market, and giving them an outlet, a pathway towards achieving their own livelihoods again. The other two on the left side there that you'll see, the top one is sustainability, and I like to term sustainability within the context of resilience or fragility. We really don't know what future generations are going to need going forward. We have an idea. We know they're going to need these 4 major things. They're going to need food, water, shelter, and the ability to socialize with each other. But beyond that, we don't know the details. So sustainability isn't about a bunch of prescriptive approaches. It's a process. It's a path that we have to enable. And resilience is basically the idea of a system or an approach to sustainability that can withstand these unexpected and uncertain risks and shocks that may come as markets shift and as resources change. And then the last one you'll see there is the idea of capacities, building capacities. Are we building adaptive capacity or maladaptive capacity? And by adaptive capacity, I'm talking about industries that are able to reshift and refocus as that ball changes. And then down at the bottom, without going into detail here, we kind of picked these major topics here from a paper that came out over the last year that talks about the major planetary thresholds, that if we can try to focus on trying to address these thresholds and making sure that we don't pass critical points in some of these thresholds, then we can do a good work towards creating a more sustainable economy. And so those were the ones that we pulled from the paper. And to kind of give it one more summation of what I'm talking about here, we grabbed a paper that tried to say, what is the carbon footprint of the average household in the United States? And this will give you a feel for where green jobs are going to come. Because if we're trying to reduce this, and in general, green jobs in many ways are really about energy and water. There is a lot of other things going on, but those are the key resources that we're managing for. And energy is obviously embedded within this carbon footprint. You can see here between transportation, housing, food, and then goods and services, which are basically those consumer materials that enable that sense of community and that sociability I'm talking about. These are the major categories, and so that's what we're trying to address. And you can get a feel here from their study which ones have the most room for improvement. And we're talking about motor vehicle fuel, and you saw the great demonstrations out front here about some alternative fueled vehicles and different ways to move from place to place. But as you all know, it's not just about improving the efficiency or changing the type of fuel in a vehicle. It's also about creating freedom for choice for people to move via non-automotive pathways, whether that's bike lanes or more walkable communities or mass transit. Within the housing realm, you can see obviously energy, electricity, natural gas issues are quite large. And then within food, what we eat, how we procure it is big. And so I'm going to come back to these issues here for a minute and kind of ask you to think about it in this context of relationships. Greener, not green, because there is no definitive green. There's just greener or less impactful. And the reason that some of these practices we're trying to shift on is because we've created an economy around cheap, abundant, very flexible and widely available fuel sources that have become easy to access over the last 100 years. And I want to give you a little perspective of just what is embedded in the energy that powers our economy and how that's allowed us to maybe lose some of our innovation and creativity from a design standpoint, whether we're talking about design of buildings or design of communities from a transportation standpoint or design of goods and products. We've kind of gotten lazy, and I think the green jobs market and the green economy is really about embracing that past and saying we're not going to be lazy anymore about this. We're going to figure out better ways to do this. So to put it in perspective, that one barrel of oil that you see right there has enough energy when you factor in that an average human can sustain about 75 watts of power indefinitely over time. That barrel of oil is the equivalent of 22,658 human labor hours. If you look at work as energy, as the ability to do work, that's equivalent to one human working a 40-hour work week for 10.9 years, or that same amount of energy, the way that we currently use it, can be used to power a bus for 300, a VW bus that you see there, for 330 miles. One human working for 10.9 years, the productive labor that we used to get out of them, or 330 miles to drive that one vehicle. This is what we've done. We have shifted from human jobs to machine jobs. We're doing things with machines that we used to do with humans. I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong, but that's the reality of it. And now we're trying to think about how to reemploy people when we get such cheap labor from these virtual energy slaves that you see here. Put it into perspective a little bit more, this is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill shortly after it had exploded there. There was 4.9 million barrels of oil leaked into the Gulf of Mexico as a result of that oil spill. It resulted in $5 to about $21 million in EPA fines. I'm not sure where the final number may have panned out. When you go back to that same calculation, that's equivalent to about 111 billion human hours of productive work lost if you look at humans being able to produce 75 watts of power on a sustained basis. Or you could say, working a 40-hour work week, that would be the equivalent for 1 year of 53 million people working those 111 billion human hours. This is a lot of production and productive work that we have at our disposal. So we're trying to find this happy medium between still having all of these creature comforts and these wonders of modern technology that come with this very dense energy and still providing jobs. So there's going to be a happy medium there somewhere. So again, when we're thinking about this relationship between things, greener than what? What about this baby lettuce that you see here? You see this at the grocery store, you think, okay, that's part of the green economy, right? That's producing food. Depending on how they're doing it, maybe it isn't as green as you think. This is a conventional way that it's done, very mass-produced. Again, I'm not saying that there's anything right or wrong with this, but this uses a lot of energy. One calculation in a scientific study suggested it took about 80 calories of fossil fuels for every 1 calorie of food that was produced in these baby lettuce farms. We'll compare that to something like this. And I use this as an example. This is actually a photo of Cuba. What happened in Cuba in the 1990s when the Soviet Union collapsed is they were their main energy provider. They were as fossil fuel and as fertilizer intensive as the United States was from an agricultural standpoint. And literally overnight, they had to redefine their economy because they lost that energy source. They went through what they referred to as the special period. They reduced their caloric intake down to about 1,000 or 1,100 calories a day on average per person because they just weren't able to produce as much food at first. They reshifted, they started introducing agriculture into Havana and other urban areas. They started creating these kind of polycultures of agriculture. You can see here, this is a very different type of approach. Now they're using much more organic because they don't have the ability to use those fossil fuel-based fertilizers and those big machines, and they've brought their caloric intake back up. And so, in a sense, that I would argue is a international success story from a green job standpoint. The baseline shifted on them, and they adjusted and adapted to it. I know that often you hear within the green community, eat less meat, it's a greener thing. That may be true in some ways, and if you're talking about a CAFO, confined area feeding operation like you see here, okay, that makes sense. I went that vegetarian route for about 10 years of my life, very close to it, not quite, and it was also the least healthy period of my life. And I've done a lot of reading and research and changed things, and now I'm back to not being that vegetarian and still feeling sustainable because I'm focusing on Florida-based, grass-fed, grass-finished meats and other Florida fruits and vegetables and other things. So this is a very different way to procure meat. It provides habitat for other species. It conserves land here in the state. So you can't just say meat is not green. A green job or a green economy moves in a different way than that. It can be greener than an alternative, right? Another thing to put into perspective from a job standpoint is thinking about how many people used to work in agriculture. We used to have, at the turn of the century, 1900, approximately 38 to 40% of the U.S. population was employed in the agricultural sector. In the late 1700s, it was closer to 90%. Now, it's down to about 2%. So you can see what we've done is, as I had described, we've replaced a lot of human labor with machines and the energy that powers them. Do you think that is going to continue to drop indefinitely, or do you think that may come back up? I know a lot of people in my generation are starting to think about getting into agriculture again, and I think that that's definitely part of the green economy. From a greener standpoint, these are all examples of pretty car-centric urban design patterns. Well, this is still an opportunity for cars, but I would argue it's greener. This is Tokyo. You can see here between the children walking across the street, the very large, very obvious crosswalk, everybody using their bicycles. You can see electrified light rail, and you can see there's also room for the cars. There's choice, there's diversity, there's options. They're still using energy, but they're using it in different ways, and I would argue probably using it more productively. So this is greener than the alternative. So any job that's associated with producing these things may arguably be a green job. But I also want to say that the devil is in the details with some of these things. So I know it's probably hard to read this chart, but basically this is the carbon footprint of a bunch of different modes of transportation. And at the top, the very top line, is a conventional gas sedan family vehicle. The bar below it, that's bigger, that produces more carbon emissions, is an SUV. The bar below that is a pickup truck. And so that all kind of flows, and it makes sense to you. You say, okay, yeah, those are bigger vehicles, they're consuming more energy and doing it less efficiently. And then that smallest line that you see there, that's an urban diesel bus. Oh, it's the most efficient, great. It's everything that you've heard about mass transit. Well, the biggest line, just above that smallest line, is also an urban diesel bus. What's the difference between those two lines, and how come it can be both the most efficient mode of transportation and the least efficient mode of transportation?
There are more people using it during peak.
That's exactly right. One is on peak and one is off peak. So you could argue that off peak, that is not a very green job, whether you're driving it or producing that bus. On peak, it is. So the devil's in the details. We, as consumers, as citizens, have to engage. We have to also take responsibility for the green economy. We can't just look at businesses and say, it's up to you to create these jobs. We have to drive that. We have to use these things when they become available to us. We have to make these choices that drive the green economy, choosing different ways to provide shelter, provide food, provide mobility. I'll give you an example of one success story here in the United States from this standpoint. If anybody's been to Portland before, you probably have recognized it's a pretty bicycle-friendly community. And not just that, they've actually kind of built this entire culture around that particular mode of transportation. The average commute in Portland is 4 miles per day less than the average national commute. Well, what does that 4 miles mean? It means 2.9 billion miles less traveled by vehicles per year in Portland, with a cost of $1.1 billion saved in fuel avoided. And ultimately, they estimated in the study that 800 million of that 1.1 billion stayed locally. People that weren't spending money on fuel to power those vehicles spent that money on local things. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Portland has more restaurants per capita than any city in the United States. That's a pretty green local job, a restaurant, especially these small family restaurants that you have out there. So they've reinvested that savings and stimulated that green jobs economy even more. They're getting extra dividends. They've also reduced greenhouse gas emissions. They also spend about 4% less from a family budget on transportation than the average for the rest of the United States. They also own about 9 fewer cars per 1,000 people. And they also report much higher satisfaction on their mobility opportunities and their transportation infrastructure, and much higher likelihoods to take transit or commute by bike. So by making some better choices that were driven partly by business, partly by policy and regulations, they've had this entire local economy kind of evolve around that transportation sector. Thinking again about this greener, this comparison, this relationship. We can look at this and say, well, is this the solution for providing housing for a growing population in a meaningful way, either from a socially fulfilling or an energy standpoint? What can we learn from patterns from the past? These cracker homes may look like a poor person's home, but they use a lot less energy. Why? They're designed a lot differently. They're designed using the free infrastructure and resources that are provided through the prevailing breezes, through the shading, through daylight, through these other things that we're starting to finally recognize in the regular building sector. And what about this? You could argue that that's even greener than a cracker house, right? This is a very mobile way to provide shelter for a hunter-gatherer society that can actually move with their food source. They can leave under a disaster situation if there's a hurricane or something else. And I'm not saying obviously we're all going to live in teepees, but what lessons can we learn from these things? Where are these going to inspire the green economy? How can we create that adaptive capacity? How can we ensure resilience to changing fundamentals in the energy markets at a global level, to changing patterns in weather and climate, to changing water quality and water quantity concerns? Because at the end of the day, all of these technologies, all of this modern economy is really only effective as the user, as us. And I like to show this thermostat because this is a perfect, very succinct example of this. In studies, these EPA, Energy Star approved thermostats are supposed to save energy. And from an engineering model, they do. You put your set points, you tell it when to go on, when to go off, and as long as the set points are good, then it saves energy. On the ground in California, they did some studies and realized that they were saving no energy in the houses where they were applied. Why? Well, it could be a variety of things. People were not installing them correctly, they were changing their set points, maybe they were offsetting the energy savings they were getting from this with new energy consumption in other realms of their lifestyle and within the house. So we have to remember that really this is about us. The green jobs economy is about us at the end of the day. And so to kind of summarize and close this up, some of the different papers and studies around the world that are talking about where the green economy is going and green jobs, and how will we know when we get there? And I've already said I don't think that we'll ever actually get there because it's a moving target that we'll always be chasing. But they say that there are some commonalities of knowing that there's success. One of them is empowering people. Just like women were empowered during World War II when they were asked to step up and fill the void for all the men that were serving abroad, and they created the response that allowed us to win that war. This economy is going to empower groups of people that are currently underutilized. It's also going to be integrated across the economy. It's going to be transdisciplinary and interact with lots of different sectors. Changes that are made and improvements that are made in one realm are going to affect the other. So for example, creating electrified automobiles is a good thing. I think most of us feel like that's where we need to go. At the same time, we are now taking, by doing that, a energy demand source that's like cats and dogs. Cars and buildings are like cats and dogs. They eat out of different food bowls. Cars generally are eating out of the petroleum food bowl. Buildings are generally eating out of the natural gas, nuclear, and coal food bowl. Once you start having cars eating out of that same one, you need to make building efficiency improvements to free up the resources and the electricity to power those vehicles. You can't have one without the other. These things are integrated and they affect each other. It's also going to be a productive economy. It's going to be focused on the people and on what we produce and the real outcomes. Because at the end of the day, you can't measure a green job market and the success of the green economy by simply saying this is the number of people employed. That's an output. That's not an outcome. We talked about outcomes. Outcomes are improved health, improved livelihoods, improved equity, improved adaptive capacity, improved resilience. This is where we want to go. We want to know how to measure this. We have to set goals. And so I challenge you all here in Sarasota to lead the way, as you have been for the rest of the state, to show us how to do this, to show us how to set goals, how to monitor progress, how to measure and verify success, how to change course when things are not working. And it also needs to be balanced. There needs to be a balance between the public sector and the regulations and policies that try to stimulate innovation and the private sector and the ways that they respond to those. There needs to be a balance between these things. We need to learn how to have a true conversation and not pretend like we can have one without the other. And we also have to integrate people into that discussion. At the end of the day, I think we can do this. I hope we can do this. And I'm proud to be here today to share some of these thoughts with you all, and I wish you all the best going forward. And I hope you share your lessons learned with us so we can try to share them around the state through cooperative extension. Thank you.